Hello and welcome to 2023, the year of Microsoft 365 Backup. Today's webinar is sponsored by Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I am excited to be here for this star-studded panel discussion. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Now, we've got an action-packed session that will take up the full time allotment today, so we won't have time for a live Q&A session. However, the Veeam team will see all of your questions afterward and be able to get back to you, so send those questions along. The Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh is going to fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know there in the Q&A, and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a guide by Veeam to Microsoft 365 Backup, a Gartner report addressing the question, should I back up Microsoft 365, and a free 30-day trial download from Veeam. There are also a handful of great Actual Tech Media resources, the Gorilla Guide Book Club, the ATM Decisions Group, the ATM Event Center. So check out all those links and feel free to share them with your colleagues and your friends who would be interested. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for that prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So even though we're not doing a live Q&A portion, we still want to encourage you to be sure to ask those pressing questions. So to that end, we have an additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event is over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. As promised, we've got a star-studded collection of presenters today. This is really going to be an interesting and excellent presentation. I'm really looking forward to it myself. We've got a Veeam product expert, an analyst from IDC, a Microsoft MVP, and a bona fide user of the tech with lots of in-the-trenches experience and insights. So this is going to be a great panel. I'm going to hand things over to Edward Watson from Veeam, who will keep the conversation and the event rolling, and I'll let Edward introduce his fellow panelists. Take it away, Edward.
Hello, my name is Edward Watson. I am a Principal Product Marketing Manager at Veeam, and it's my great pleasure today to host this session. 2023, the year of Microsoft 365 Backup. Why is it the year of Microsoft 365 Backup? Well, we have a ton of great stats, a ton of great knowledge and know-how we're going to be sharing today. Some great research results actually as well from Archana Venkatraman with a research director at IDC Europe. We've also got Joy Apple on the panel today, Microsoft MVP for Office Apps and Services. And we've got Ale Sadanichi, Network and Architect Manager at Loreco, and also a proud Veeam customer, I may add as well. So with that, let's dive straight into this session. And again, we're going to be having Archana here. We're lucky enough to have Archana walking us through a lot of great research she's done and really showing why this might indeed be the year of Microsoft 365 Backup. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball over to you, Archana.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you for that introduction. And from my side as well, it's a great pleasure to be here. I have a personal passion for this topic. I've been covering this since 2019. So it's really nice to see how I've been tracking this for such a long time and see the changes in the market as well. And it's also a great pleasure to be in this esteemed company of Joy, Ale, and yourself, because we've had some discussions on this topic previously. I myself am personally very much looking forward to our discussions as well. So my role here is to kind of show almost the state of the nation, right? What cloud adoption looks like, what SaaS adoption looks like, what M365 adoption in particular looks like, and the risks that it can bring in if a lot of business critical data is in that environment and organizations are not really thinking about governing those environments and thinking about enterprise-grade security and governance of those environments. And I'll also share some highlights on what are the strategies and thinking and investment patterns that organizations are taking moving forward to give their business teams all the capabilities to leverage all the innovation that's coming out of M365 environments, right? They just want to make sure that they have the right guardrails to help their business users capitalize on all the innovation that relentless innovation that's coming forward from the SaaS environment, especially the M365 environment. So without further ado, let's get started. I want to start with this idea of where we are in terms of cloud services, right? Our research shows that for organizations that are mature cloud users, not just static cloud users, but mature cloud users, data gravity is very much in the cloud for these organizations, right? So more than 50% of critical data is in the cloud for more than 60% of organizations. And we think that the don't knows are also very much in the side of them having cloud as where their data gravity sits. So cloud is very much foundational for business innovation, and business innovation happens with data, and data is definitely moving into cloud environments. Now, if we break this down a little bit more, we asked organizations, in which of these cloud environments are you seeing highest amount of data growth? And SaaS, software as a service, has always been one of those environments which was adopted early on by a lot of organizations, and it's one of the fastest growing still in terms of cloud adoption. So when we look at business data growing in each of these environments, whether it's IaaS, whether it's dedicated data clouds such as Snowflake, or whether it's PaaS environments, we still see that the fastest growing and the second fastest growing environment when it comes to business critical data, it's very much the SaaS environment. For some organizations, on average, it's 50% data growth year on year. So we're talking about a lot of data in these environments, and that means you no longer can ignore hardening those environments to make sure you give the business users what they want and that continuity and stability. We asked organizations which of these SaaS environments are actually most strategic to you as well. We gave them a big laundry list, and Microsoft came out as #1 in terms of the strategic SaaS services, followed by Google Workspace. It was very popular in academics, universities, and some public sector organizations. And then you had core workloads of CRM and ERP environments such as Salesforce as well. But Microsoft was the #1 strategic SaaS environment for a lot of organizations. So if you look at the critical data in SaaS environments, it's even within the M365 environment, it's not just one place, right? You have Azure AD, you have all of the different M365 portfolio suite, right? You have data in SharePoint, you have data in OneDrive, you have data in Teams environment, and now with a lot more Power BI connected to the Teams environment, a lot of developers and business users are finding newer ways to bring data into those environments to just do business better. So a lot of data is growing very rapidly in these environments, and it's becoming a lot critical as well. When I was talking to a legal firm a couple of months ago, and they were talking about how sometimes they have a lot of important conversations with customers in the Teams environment, and they need to retain those conversations in case, for a long time, they need to retain that data for a long time because it's actually important business critical data. So people are using Teams environment differently, a lot more strategically. People are using SharePoint environment a lot more strategically. So when you have a lot of critical data in these SaaS environments, you need to start thinking about enterprise grade capabilities for those environments. I really would love to hear some of your thoughts into this adoption as well, Edward, Joanna, Ale.
Yeah. In fact, I'm wondering, Ale, do organizations have it right as they're thinking through some of these critical applications? I mean, if we jump back to say the slide before, I mean, do these organizations have it right? What are your thoughts on this growing data we're seeing?
Well, you cannot deny that nowadays the cloud presence is definitely growing, and Office 365 in general as well. And like 10 years ago, it was definitely cloud was a topic for every company. Everybody wanted to migrate to it. Then people started to be a little bit hesitant. They were talking about hybrid clouds, a little bit about maybe hosting something on premises, moving something to the cloud, creating all those nice workflows. But still, whatever it is, we cannot deny that Google Workplace 365, this is a very important and valuable player nowadays. And for instance, our company we are feeling that Teams, as Archana mentioned, they're used more and more in a very critical way in some very important data is SharePoint as well, Mail, and well, Azure, well, we don't even need to go into that because, as you know, with the development of services, a lot of companies are tending to move data over there. So I can only agree the critical data is in the cloud, and looks like nothing is going to get it out of there. Of course, there are some individual cases, but in general, yes, it seems very legit to me.
Cool. Thoughts on this, Joy?
I'm going to echo what LA and Archana both said. Innovation is happening in the cloud now. And the first slide showed that mature companies are about 60% in the cloud. That means they're growing, they're moving, that's where we're going. And the other companies will eventually, they will eventually catch up because that's where the bulk of innovation, the tools, the functionality that they need are going to be, right? Microsoft's a cloud-first approach now, which in the terms of security, reliability, even for those that are 60% cloud, there's still consideration because that other 40% is on-prem. So we have a diverse data landscape that's got to be taken into account, coming and going. But I think as we all, as organizations around the globe start to mature, again, that offering is going to be that cloud-first approach.
Great points.
Any thoughts from your side then, Edward?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I was surprised maybe to see Azure AD and Google Workspace above M365. That was maybe a little bit of an eye-opener for me, but I think, the criticality of the apps, I think, is in the eye of the beholder, and ultimately, every organization is different. But I agree with everything, all the points made.
It also depends who you were asking.
Yeah, right.
Cool. Okay, the slides are a bit jumpy for me today, but now let's get into the backup environment, right? Dedicated SaaS backup. We've been tracking this market for a very long time. So back in 2019, when we first started looking at this market for dedicated data protection for SaaS environment, particularly M365, 6 in 10 organizations were completely ignoring it. They were not considering it at all. So we've seen 10% improvement in the last 4 years, I would say. So like 50% of organizations, like 5 in every 10 organizations are using dedicated SaaS backup today. But what's also encouraging is to see how around 36% of organizations are actually saying that they have plans to adopt it in the next 12 months, which means there's an intent and there's an understanding, and I'm hoping that these organizations are not the ones who have burned their fingers by losing data, but actually are looking at it as a good data hygiene approach and realizing how important it is to protect all of their data. No data should be left behind, especially no critical data should be left behind. And they're taking a proactive approach to managing their M365 SaaS data. About 14% of organizations have said that they will rely on native capabilities. I think these are organizations that I would categorize these organizations as ones that are not thinking about cloud strategically. They are looking at cloud, they're kind of late adopters to the cloud. They don't fully get the value of it. They just use the cloud maybe as an excuse to, they go to the cloud from a point of view of saving costs on data centers and CapEx environment, right? So they have a very limited worldview of what cloud can bring to them. But I think over time, as they step into the cloud and they start seeing benefits, they will realize the value it brings in, and more, and as their data gravity shifts to the cloud as well, a lot of them would then think about adopting specific dedicated SaaS backup for their environments as well. So I think our hope is that a lot more organizations would think this way, because it's very important. 50% are already there. 36% will be there in the next 12 months. So organizations that don't want to be left behind will have to start thinking about it, because there's something that's adding value to these organizations, which is why they're investing in dedicated backup. I just wanted to quickly bring in this view from 2021 as well, which is very similar, where actually a lot more organizations said that they are using dedicated backup. How I would read this is to say that we have seen an accelerated adoption of M365 in the last 2 years, especially after the pandemic. And a lot more organizations understand the value of dedicated backup, but they just haven't, backup has not yet caught up with the accelerated rate of adoption that M365 environments themselves have seen. So we will see a lot more momentum going forward as companies really take to M365 a lot more and move from even a hybrid environment where they have some exchange on-prem, they would like fully move into M365 and start thinking about dedicated backup. So although it looks like we have moved one step backwards, I would say it's only because the adoption of M365 has been at such an accelerated pace that this is still catching up, but it's quite encouraging to see a lot more organizations thinking about adopting it. I also wanted to bring in this idea of data loss fears in SaaS environments. So why is a dedicated backup important? We asked organizations in which of these SaaS or container environments currently in use in your organization are you most worried about when it comes to data loss? And for a lot of organizations, it were SaaS environments, particularly M365. And it's not because the platform is lacking by any means. It's because organizations don't necessarily fully understand what is included and what is not in a native SaaS backup environment, right? You have retention policies, you have SLAs that come with it, but if you are an organization, if you're a heavily regulated organization, your retention requirements are very different from the standard retention requirements. So you need to take charge of what your retention needs are and make sure you have all the environment around your M365 environment to meet those compliance requirements or retention requirements or archiving requirements. So that's the reason why a lot of organizations said they were worried about data loss. It's because of the practices that were in place in their organizations. That takes us to this idea of what were the different scenarios that companies cited in terms of data loss. So a lot of it was having fears around cyber threats, but there was also a lot of accidental deletion. There's so much of innovation in the M365 space. Organizations are using all these sync capabilities where they have SharePoint sync to their own environments, and they work on a project, they finish a project, they think that their project is done, and they delete it on their version on their desktop. But then because it's synced, it just deletes it. And 6 months later, 1 year later, if they want to revisit that project, that data has been deleted. So it's not because the environment was lacking, it's because the processes they had in place or the practices they had in place, and they didn't really think about retention strategies or what if they need that data later. That's why we clubbed that as accidental deletion. And then there were some fears around cloud platform outages. For a lot of organizations, having access to data, and the use of application are very closely connected when it comes to M365. But still, a lot of organizations were thinking about data on its own and considering, in case of an outage, do we have access to our data? And it also gives them that ability to not have that concentration risk in any cloud environment. So worries about platform outages were one of the reasons for citing data loss. And then reliance on default retention, I already gave some examples around that. And this is not necessarily related to M365, but overall, in terms of broader SaaS capabilities, companies also cited data corruption, because if they were trying to use production data for test and dev purposes, then they were introducing newer errors in their production environments. And if to manually go back and rectify that, it would take a lot of time and effort. So avoiding that data corruption was one of the main reasons why some of the savvy organizations said we will have a backup environment, because there's so many different use cases that we can use that backup data for. I want to know if that resonates with you all as well.
Well, if you would be so kind to share the previous slide again. Yep. Well, I don't know if I may jump in. I can tell you how we at our organization look at those challenges. So, for instance, for us, because the previous slide before that, it was the importance of data. We also care a lot about SAP and Oracle data, which we're using in SaaS environments. That's what I also wanted to mention, because, you know, if you're working with critical data, which is located inside of your databases, and you're losing it, it might lead to a business stop for multiple days, or, well, I don't know, even a couple of hours. That can be a significant impact on our production. And you know, if the executive is losing an email in Microsoft 365, or something is lost in Teams, maybe that also wouldn't be as bad as it seemed at the beginning. However, every company needs to determine it on their own. So if we are talking about those particular 6 cases, we the most afraid definitely of data corruption, because it's impacting the most. You know, the second and the third, that would be the ransomware and reliance on default retention. The ransomware, I think it's very clear, because, you know, with modern technologies, the risk of cyber attacks or whatever is increasing, and it's crucial, you know, to keep your security team aligned with all the engineers, including the backup guys, the data protection networking specialists, so you be absolutely sure that you would be able to restore the data and have it in a safe place if something happens. Default retention, many people underestimate it, but, you know, if you really want to be in full control of data and restore what you want at the time you want, it's definitely a super important thing. Then accidental deletion, we're trying to work around it, and we've been a bit paranoid, so we have a lot of backups everywhere, but it still can happen. Then lack of access to historical data because of the legal requirements. You know, sometimes you really have to pull the data which was generated like 5 years ago, and if you don't have it, then you can also run into trouble. That would be number 5. And number 6 is cloud platform outages for us, but it also can be ranked differently, because, you know, in our organization we're trying to architecture everything around the way that it would be failing over, and we have multiple instances, different regions, so we feel protected. So it's also ultra important, but for me personally, it's number 6 on this list. I hope I was able to start the topic.
No, that's valuable insight from, because you're there every day working with the same organization's data, making sure that all of these areas are taken into account from your perspective. I would say from a consultant perspective, it's very similar, but the order would be a little bit different, just because we're taking into account different personas, different sectors, different industries that are looking at data very similarly, but still there's some differences. I know personally I have a training background, so accidental deletion tends to be one of the things I look at first, just because I still have some trauma from my help desk days of people having issues with PST files, or they delete their email and immediately go clean out their email recycle bin because they can't stand for there to be junk there. So you see people delete things from SharePoint or Teams and then immediately go clean out their recycle bin. But there's not a backup strategy in place, right? You've got a limited amount of time. You've got a limited safety net. So accidental deletion and reliance on default retention very much can go hand in hand, because a lot of organizations are very busy and they don't truly value the importance of training, and perhaps the importance of not reliance on the default retention hasn't gone up the chain far enough to say we truly need to have a backup in place, because Microsoft can't get that one or can't, won't, we could debate that, but it's not realistic to ask them to go get one even if that's important Excel file in the organization. So a lot of different persons around that. I would say ransomware, agree, that's a big priority, simply because there are a lot of bad actors out there. And as we are innovating to the cloud, that's where a lot of those bad actors are focusing their time and attention. So that's definitely a high priority. I would agree that when it comes to the cloud platform outages, we're very blessed. The technology has matured so much that that's not necessarily a top of mind concern when we go to the cloud, because we do live in an age where cloud tech is very reliable, but nothing's perfect. So there still needs to be the ability to have that replication of data. So if you have an issue in one area, you can fail back to another. But I think all of these are really great top 6 hit list items to have, that every organization should be having this conversation where governance and security need to come hand in hand and be identified.
Yeah, I mean,
I really think about the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Archana.
No, I was just gonna say I really like Joy had the persona view, right? For different personas, different things might be important. And Ale, to your point, like I really like that example of why data corruption is so important for your organization alongside ransomware. So some very important points. And these are like a decision tree for an organization, right? Do I invest in dedicated backup or not? And you go through a decision tree, and the minute you check on one of these, you know that you need it, because otherwise you're having a very risky strategy. Sorry, Edwin.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Totally agree with all the points. It's just interesting how some things become more important than others as the years go by. I think if you talk to an admin just a few years ago, maybe they would have been more concerned about accidental deletion than things like ransomware, where it was maybe less frequent or wasn't as mainstream as it is now. But 50% of organizations using a third-party backup today. In my opinion, that's great. Still not good enough. Still, we need more companies, protecting this data. Obviously, we're not going to ever get to 100. I hope we get to 100% one day. But I think we're making a lot of great progress, and I think we're making a lot more progress than we have in the past. So that's great to see.
I will add one interesting story that's just fresh off the presses. It's not so much a performance outage issue, but it does tie into data loss. There was recently a change to one of the underlying APIs for copying content inside of Microsoft 365. And I could go into the boring details. Most people probably wouldn't be interested, but had some customers, partners, people that were seeing data not move over when they were doing copies and migrations, archival processes, things like that. You get to that final destination, and because that copy API wasn't bringing everything over, what's going on? Some partners were seeing like migration failures and things like that. And it was just because there was a change. But for the ones that had their backup, and one of them very proudly said, well, we have Veeam, so we're not worried about it. I can just go browse and grab that data, bring it right back. It was a lifesaver. We caught it within, I say we, the community, noticed it within a 30-day, nope, that's not right, little less than a 90-day window of time. So most people were protected by just the default retention. But for those that had already cleaned out recycle bins and done all that kind of content, just being able to go to that backup meant they didn't have data loss. So it really shows, even if it's things functioning as we thought, as anticipated, we still have to be protected.
Great call up, Joy.
Yeah, that is such a beautiful illustration of the value of backup, right? It's in the peace of mind, and also the value of backup is in recovery. If you can recover it at the speed and at the format of data that you want for your business, then that's what recovery is all about. And you can do that with dedicated backup environments. So it's very much in recovering and making sure that you can continue your business and have a stable environment and give the business users the experience that they want, which is continuous availability of data at all times. And they've come to expect of that, especially of these newer SaaS environments represent a breath of fresh air for them, right? It signifies digital transformation in terms of user experience. So they want that access to data at all times, and that's become an expectation. And if IT can live up to that expectation using all the tools and technologies, then they're delivering the right SLAs. That's a great example.
Mm-hmm.
And Edward, thanks for your point. Shout out on ransomware as well. I think we have some stats around that, which hopefully will help more organizations think about these data loss scenarios a lot more seriously. And to your point, that 50%, maybe when we do a research next year, we'll likely see 3/4 of organizations really taking dedicated backup environments a lot more seriously.
Fingers crossed. Yep.
So let's go further ahead. Yeah. If there's one key point we want to tell today to you guys, it's this shared responsibility model in the SaaS environment, right? If you want to be successful in the cloud, you need to understand shared responsibility model. Why have organizations taken to SaaS? Why do they like it so much? Why do business users, it's all influenced by business users, right? It's not the IT making these decisions. It's the business users that are saying, I want these applications, because it helps them. It gives them the speed, it gives them the collaboration that they want, and it gives them all the access to all the tools and capabilities they need to innovate a lot faster. And if you look at the SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, and on-prem model, if you see in the on-prem model, everything is dark blue, which means it's the end user's responsibility. And in that model, what happens is you need a big team of IT specialists. You need them to make sure that they spend a lot of time maintaining, keeping the lights on, and ensuring that everything works, which is not necessarily a core competence of, say, an ice cream vendor or an automotive industry, right? So what SaaS brings, or even PaaS platforms bring, is that it helps organizations focus on their core competency, on their IP, on their specialism, and make sure that they have the best-in-class technology capabilities that can look after itself, at least at the infrastructure level, so that they can be responsible for people and data. So in the SaaS shared responsibility model, if you look at, for example, if you take M365 particularly, let's break down Microsoft's responsibility, right? They are responsible for infrastructure uptime, infrastructure availability, and durability. They are as a vendor, Microsoft is fulfilling the role of a data processor. They of course bring into features like basic data replication, backup, initial backup, some redundancy capabilities, and short-term recovery that Joy was referring to. All those are a good starting point for an organization to hit the ground running when they adopt these technologies, right? But if you look at the administration responsibility, user responsibility, and data responsibility, it is very much a customer's responsibility. Business data residing anywhere, whether it's SaaS environments or your on-prem environment, business data is a customer's responsibility. And that's why enterprise-grade backup and data retention also becomes an end user's responsibility. You can use in the capabilities available in M365, such as redundancy and initial data replication and those security features and encryption and all that, but you need to build on top of that. And the role of the customer is that of a data owner. They are the data controller, whereas Microsoft is the data processor. And there is a big difference when it comes to legalities of these things. So in case of data loss or in case of privacy loss, it's always the data controller's responsibility. So customers need to be fully aware of what their responsibilities are, and they need to make sure they have right tools and strategies in place to fulfill their obligations when it comes to their side of the responsibility. And of course, hold the vendor for their side of responsibility as well in terms of SLAs and availability of that infrastructure, and call them out if there is an outage, right? So that's where the vendor puts in a lot of their efforts as well. So having these kind of advanced security functions and incident response and remediation and business continuity is all something that the user has to think about. So this is one key thing I wanted to share today. Wondered what your thoughts were.
Yeah, Joy, what are your thoughts? I mean, does the community get this? I mean, what are your thoughts here when you're talking with your clients?
So the consultant answer is it depends. Depends on who you're talking to, right? I say by and large, it's becoming clearer to most people. I've been sitting here every time I see this slide, I'm like, this should be broadcast more because it is so clear. I do think there's a misconception, and this is potentially by those less mature organizations that haven't really done the thorough research and investigation into moving to the cloud. Oh, we give it to the cloud and we don't have to worry about it anymore. Microsoft does all of it. Salesforce does all of it. We just get to the data. And that's not accurate, right? There's still a lot of responsibility as an owner and a steward of that data to make sure that our employees are accessing it responsibly, that we've put controls in place to make sure it stays where it needs to stay, or if it needs to be shared, that it can only be shared with appropriate people, appropriate domains, things like that. There's also a little bit of fear. I came into the Microsoft space out of the government side of the world here in the States. And I can remember sitting in a room hearing someone say, the government will never go to the cloud. Well, now looking back 10 plus years, yes, they did, but a lot of controls had to be put in place first. And we still hear from people that are GCC or GCC high. They don't get all the cool stuff as soon as everybody else because there's controls that have to be put in place by the cloud provider and then vetted by the owner of that data. But again, the illustration here of this slide, we see the kind of bicolored squares where those roles merge, right? It's a relationship that has to take place between the customer and the provider to make sure everything's set up responsibly.
Ale, were you aware of this shared responsibility model before you adopted backup? I guess is my question.
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, yes, I was aware of this shared responsibility model. And I'll explain you why. Because I was basically having a chance to work with all those solutions. So historically, we had the stuff on-prem, and we were using a couple of infrastructure as a service providers where we were hosting our applications, and different private cloud providers. And we started with, well, conventional cloud providers. And, you know, by working with all of those solutions, you kind of get into that responsibility model and metrics. And I even do remember that like 6 years ago, we were drawing something like this in Excel. Maybe it wasn't looking as professional, but at least we were also getting to this idea because we had our conversation with our hosting and housing providers, you know, like, guys, aren't you supposed to do that? And they were like, well, maybe it's on you, and, you know. So get an experience on the fly, let's call it like this. If somebody would share this particular diagram 6 years ago, I would be really happy. But I can say that, yes, I'm well, kind of very well acquainted with this. And, well, I do agree that's where it is. And as you can see, information and data in any model is on a customer. So please have a good look at your data.
Absolutely. And it is interesting to me, you know, out of all of these platforms and deployment models, on-prem, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, SaaS does offer the least responsibility for the customer. And maybe that's why there is this misconception around, I've got so less responsibility, it also means the data is my responsibility as well. And maybe that's why that exists, I'm not sure. But I think there is this idea that because I'm now moving to this software as a service model that takes care of so much, I'm just automatically taken care of.
Perspective.
Yeah, that is such a good rationale to explain this, right? And I mean, shared responsibility model is a golden rule, right? I mean, it's taken some companies 4 years to realize this, and for some of them, it's only after they've burned their fingers that they realize how important this is. So they've been wrapped on the knuckles by the regulators, and that's when they realize what their responsibilities are. And we are now seeing that for everything you have to think in the cloud, you have to think about shared responsibility model, right? Right now, a lot of focus is on cloud economics, and that's a shared responsibility model as well. I see a lot of organizations saying, hey, cloud is so expensive. All you analysts told us that cloud is where we can save costs, but it's not. And so when it comes to cloud costs, the cost of the cloud may be responsibility of the vendor, where they bring in a lot more transparency and give you clear billings. But when it comes to cost in the cloud, it really is a customer's responsibility. How you architect your applications, what applications are you putting in the cloud? Are they chatty applications? Are you doing a lot more egress than is required? Are you using the right infrastructure instances? So this idea of shared responsibility model has to be extended across the board. And it really is the golden rule for success, especially for SaaS environments. If you want to get governance right, if you want to get costs right, if you want to get compliance right, you need to think shared responsibility model.
But also just one addition from my side, let's bear in mind that it all also depends on the company. Because if we talk about the PCI compliance, for instance, that's a good example. If there is already a fully blown team which can do that, then it's one thing. If you don't have it, and then you need to invest in people, that's what you said, Archana, then it's a completely different thing. And then indeed, the cloud cost shouldn't be coming as a surprise. So it's all about finding an optimal solution for each particular case.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. Now to the topic that's almost like the topic of the decade, which is ransomware. This is just to show IDC's research on that. So, ransomware is the biggest cyber threat, bringing existential risks to organizations, right? If you have to pay huge amounts in ransom, then you really, it's a percentage of your revenue, right? So it really can pose existential risks to organizations. So what does IDC's research show? In 2022 alone, 2/3 of global organizations have admitted or have told us that they have experienced ransomware attacks. It's not that the others haven't, it's just that they either don't know yet or they are not willing to admit. So it's the reality of, it's a bitter reality of today's business operations, right? You are at cyber risks. So average business, our research shows that it has been disrupted for as long as 5 days because of a ransomware attack. And being not in business or not being available or being cut off from the internet for 5 days is a big business risk, and it's a big no-no for a lot of organizations. We talk about being in the digital decade, right, where everything happens in an instant. So if you are disrupted for 5 days, it's a big loss for an organization, whether it's economical loss or loss of trust from customers or reputational risks. So all of those come with that as well. So it was a little bit shocking to see that on average businesses were disrupted for 5 days, because some of them even said they were disrupted for as long as a week or two. So it's really a lot longer as well for some. And in terms of the average ransom in 2022, it was close to $300,000 for financial services organizations, followed by healthcare and life sciences organizations, which was at $250,000. If you look at a big tail of smaller and medium-sized businesses, it's a huge amount of money. And what we are now beginning to see is tip over, where for the bad actors, it's actually the healthcare and life sciences data that's becoming a lot more valuable than financial data. Because if you look at credit card data, it has a shorter shelf life. When you have something like a healthcare data or life sciences data, it has a much longer shelf life. So they are really targeting those environments. So it's all these biotech firms and healthcare organizations and public sector organizations that have to really be wary of big cyber risks and make sure that they are 2 steps ahead in terms of fighting this game and having a resilient environment. See, you cannot avoid an attack. There is no silver bullet to have complete resilience from ransomware. But what you can do is have clear control measures and mechanisms and measures in place to make sure that you have a way to recover and not be disrupted for 5 days. and have an option of not paying that ransom if possible. So on the right side, we have all the implications of cyber attacks, whether it's financial loss or loss of reputation and trust. And you have all these concerns about tightening regulations and speed of breach notification. All of these add to the burden for an organization, right? And we always ignore the people element when it comes to cyber attacks or recovery efforts, because for some organizations which have small, lean teams, they're working for 20, 22 hours a day to restore their business and get back up again. So it's very important to take into account the people stress that this brings in and to have clear controls in place to avoid that. And 3/4 of respondents to IDC's research also said that a lot of their data was actually exfiltrated during these kind of attacks, and 11% lost valuable, sensitive, or secrets data, and only 23% of the organizations were actually able to recover data from their backup environments. And that could be because they are not testing those environments, they don't back up all of their important data, they have not even looked at their backup environment for 3-4 years, and don't have a clear tested business continuity plan. And I think I also wanted to bring in this idea of the NIST framework. Like, you have all of these different resilience frameworks. You have the European Union's NIST 2 directive, the Digital Operational Resilience Act in Europe, the World Economic Forum Cyber Resilience Index. Organizations are looking at different frameworks to see where their weaknesses are and strengths are, and most commonly it's the NIST framework that they fall back to. And they look at all these 5 different elements. They look at the protect, detect, respond, recover, and identify, or we can start with identify, right? All those elements, and see where are they aligned in terms of how good each of these pillars are and where they need to invest. So when they have some kind of strategic priority, it helps them to use this framework and strengthen or boost their capabilities in each of these. Ali, do you use the NIST framework or anything similar to as part of your resilience strategy?
Yeah, I can confirm. I cannot really go into our cybersecurity in details, and most likely you understand why. But yes, I can confirm that we're using something more or less identical to what you're showing, because all the points which are here, they are ultra important, and every organization should at least create some kind of maybe somebody doesn't want to invent a bicycle, so they can definitely use the NIST framework, or just adjust the requirements and do the needful to ensure the safety of the data. Well, maybe it sounds a little bit generic, but all those points they are of an extreme importance, because if you look at any of them at identity management and access control protections, if it's gone, then it will be a completely huge problem for your organization. If we're talking about, just let's take random includes implementing recovery planning process and procedures to restore system and assets. I think this is like basics which needed for every organization. And based on my personal experience, I kind of know, not my organization, but, and I'm not going to say which one, a lot of people, they're not even getting to a drawing board to identify what needs to be recovered and what they are trying to achieve by backing up the data. So they don't even have a strategy for this one. Maybe, Archana, you also are doing that kind of research and you have some kind of slides with percentages. Because to me, it's kind of crucial for how long data should be kept, how quickly you should restore it, and yeah. So basics, and identify risk management strategy, including risk tolerances. This is also one of that part of the backup strategy. So I cannot put more emphasis on that whole framework. So if somebody is not using it, I would highly recommend you to pay some attention to it.
It's occurring to me as we're sitting here having this conversation in LA, as you're talking through those points. Can you imagine what a powerful exercise it would be for anyone that's joining us on this webinar If you know you don't really have the most robust framework in place, maybe not, maybe you don't even know what is in place, to take the earlier slide that has those 6 areas of concern for data loss, accidental deletion, corruption, ransomware, all that. Sit down with each of those 6 and to go around the circle for them and go, okay, accidental deletion, how are we going to identify it? You know, what are the steps we're going to do? How are we going to, and hit each one of these for every one of those 6. If they could just get in a room for a day, make those decisions, and then create the framework to implement it, that would be an extremely powerful exercise, I think, for any organization, even a mature one that has one in place, just to go through this framework and check, what are we doing? What's in place? What are the gaps? And what can we do to fill those gaps? It would be huge.
Exactly. It's like a cheat list. You can just go through the points and...
Yep. And your slides here give them the perfect starting place. If they don't know where to start, here are your 6 areas where we think you should be concerned. And this framework tells you what to do for each of those areas.
Yeah, and to a lot of organizations, I love that example of how you can bring in the data loss scenarios and connect it to the NIST framework. So it's a great way to actually practically use this framework. And I think once it can also be an eye-opener for organizations to see that backup really has a role to play, and data protection technologies really have a role to play in resilience and security. It's not a discipline that's completely away from security. It really is part of your organization's zero trust architecture or your resilience framework. So it has to be part of that holistic thinking, and you don't end up with these multiple. A lot of companies tell us that we are so over-invested in security technologies, but we are not very confident about our security postures. That's because you're looking at each of them as a discipline, and you're not even looking at your data protection technologies, because that is an important part of making sure you have a resilience framework.
Well, creating awareness now is ultra important, because a lot of people, they underestimate backup and security, both of the topics, because when backup works, nobody actually paying attention to it, but if it doesn't work, that's when the problem starts. The same with security. As long as nothing is happening, people are always thinking maybe we are having a good protection, so all good. But if something happens, yeah, that could be a huge trouble, and it can be a very big surprise.
And let's say those risky organizations listening, or hopefully not listening on the webinar, well, hopefully listening if they aren't, protecting themselves, of course. Organizations that choose to ignore things like the NIST framework, and maybe they want to gamble with their data a little bit, maybe they're okay with shelling out $300,000 for a ransomware attack. But even if they do pay ransomware, and they do end up, giving that money to criminals, there's no guarantee that they'll even get all that data back, or even in the form they need it. So it's just truly a risky gamble that a lot of organizations are playing with ransomware, and the risks involved there.
Totally agree with you, Edward.
Yeah, no, fully agree too. Oh, let's. I mean, this is a very important topic, and maybe at some point we'll discuss a lot more on this. But at least it would have given the listeners some starting point to for where you can start from, right? If everything is a lot overwhelming, look at the shared responsibility model, look at your data loss scenarios, and look at the NIST framework, and just bring them all together to win some budgets from the stakeholders and get started. Just wanted to quickly also run through what we are seeing in terms of investments. So this is the time where a lot of organizations are scaling back investments, but we are also seeing that technology investments are diverging from GDP. So like if you look at the last recession in 2008, 2009, tech spend went down as GDP went down. But this time we're actually seeing a divergence where GDP is expected to go a lot down, but tech spend is remaining resilient. But what organizations are definitely doing is reprioritizing their tech investment to invest in technologies that is going to give them the payback that they want, whether it's resilience and some kind of value realization framework they have, right? Am I getting my economics right? Am I getting my governance right? Am I getting my innovation right? So they have a few pillars, and they're investing in technologies that gives them that kind of payback. So when you look at mature organizations, more like 33% of them are looking to increase their data protection related investment in SaaS environments, while 9% are going to decrease it. The remaining ones are keeping it stable. And that itself is a high investment compared to what we saw in 2019. So a lot of organizations are either keeping their data protection investment secure, protected, or increasing it. And that's to tell the rest of the organizations that if you don't catch up, there will be a big digital divide, because organizations that have the right guardrails in place, they will be able to innovate a lot faster because they have the fundamentals right. And once they get that right, it will be very easy for them to get that speed and velocity over time. And this is pretty much one of the last slides to show that, you know, M365 backup, if you get it right, if you have a dedicated policy around it, it will give you it'll help organizations meet 4 key resilience priorities, which is not important only for the IT managers, but also for the wider C-suite, right? You have better control over data. You're able to reuse your data through backup environments for test and dev or analytics, so just auditing purposes. You just become a lot more digitally resilient as well, and build that trust and compliance with your customers. Joy or Edward or Ale, any thoughts on this?
Well,
Always thoughts.
oh, sorry.
Ale, go ahead.
Well, just all those 4 points, they are looking extremely valid, and if somebody would be asking me, I would also probably go for them. Data control, that's what we were discussing at the beginning. This is extremely important to have it in the cloud, because this is, I think, crucial for everybody to know where your data is, when you can restore, what exactly. Data reuse, there are many interesting cases where you can do that. Well, for analytics, for example, then even for, I don't know, some exotic scenarios like migrating data centers. I'm not even talking about recovery stuff. Resiliency, this is the key for, well, at least from my point of view, for any organization, because the more resilient you are, the better it is. Well, digital trust and compliance, well, modern businesses have to be compliant nowadays, and well, trust is also one of the main principles nowadays. So everything is well, perfectly aligned here.
Trust is a big deal. Compliance is huge. I think, especially in the very collaborative spaces of Microsoft 365, like, oh, we just don't delete anything, so we always have everything, and we don't have to, you know, you got compliance and legal departments that are having nightmares over everything that's living forever, because that's not always okay. So being able to know that the right content lives for the right amount of time is very, very important.
Indeed, and it will save a lot of headache without, you know, storing the unnecessary data for 10 years, which will increase the cost as well. And
space is not cheap.
Yeah, well, exactly. And we again come into the drawing board, where the most crucial is to identify your strategy as a team.
Fantastic. So the final point I want to share today is this idea of, you know, if we have convinced you that dedicated backup is very important for organizations, the next step is investing in those technologies, right? But there is an array of platform choices that organizations have available today, and sometimes choice is a curse, because when you spend so much time thinking about what you need. So we at IDC have spoken to a lot of organizations who have invested in M365 dedicated backup environments, and we have come up with a checklist on what you need to look for when investing in a Microsoft 365 data protection platform. And the features that stood out for us was this breadth and depth of features. So can it protect all of my M365 environment? Does it leave out any particular application? Is very important for organizations, because something that we are not yet there in terms of using SharePoint or OneDrive as much as we should today, but we absolutely know the direction we are going, and we don't want to be looking for another data protection platform few years down the line. So that feature list, the breadth and depth of features, as well as and breadth of services, is very important for organizations. And when I talk about services, really the ease of adoption of the platform, where sometimes it's the business users that are making these decisions. Do they have to spend a lot of time with the scripts and the APIs of a platform, or is it all very intuitive? So if it's innovative, if it offers a good support and ease of use and great feature list, then it's a good starting point for organizations. But other things that are important for them very much is scale. So for a lot of organizations, suddenly if they go through a big merger and acquisition, their scale of M365 environment is suddenly much, much bigger. Can their data protection platform cope as well? Because otherwise then they're exposing themselves to bigger risks, and they need to go through this exercise again. So they want to make sure that scale is something that the platform can help them with. And also flexibility and choice. Can I use my existing resources to use as the backup target? Does it help me back up my other application portfolio? Can I trust the vendor in terms of their data protection credentials? Do they have a platform that really can help me bring and unify data protection by bringing in all the other applications as well, to have just one platform? So flexibility and choice is very important for them as well. Maybe Edward, I bring you in here to see if this resonates in your conversations with customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really, I love the simplicity of this checklist, because really, 6 different categories, but within each of those, so much importance. I am curious though, especially LA, as you were, evaluating vendors, especially, were any of these more important than others to you?
Oh, I kind of recognize the questionnaire. I believe that I was participating in those answers.
Sure.
So I do recognize some of them from the list. I would say that I was mentioning around 5 out of 6 of those things which are over there. So yes, definitely. I guess I was not only mentioning integration, because usually we did not have that kind of problems. So scale, as Rachana mentioned, it's really important, because some parts of business, they come and go, and you need to be sure that everything is going to be easily adjustable. Features, well, obviously the more the better. It says for itself, and flexibility and choice, as also was mentioned before, the more applications you can back up, the better, because what for do you need one tool for Office 365, one for your cloud, one for your data center? If there is one console from where you can do everything, that's a perfect scenario from my point of view, at least. The simpler, the better. If we're talking about breadth of services, it's also kind of important, because technology is not standing still, and you are getting all the time new stuff. So for instance, like if you would talk about somebody backing up Kubernetes in Azure, for example, then they would be like, I don't know. And now it's kind of an absolute necessity over there, which also covers the topic of an innovation. So it's very important to stay up to date with the progress.
I don't think you could pull any one of these away.
No.
Right? They're all so important. My eye goes to scale first. LA, as you said, scalability is so important. But again, nobody's data all lives in one place. I've yet to ever see a customer who only has things in Microsoft or just in Google so you got to be able to see the data, and it's got to be restorable from any of those locations. Self-service usability is so critical in this fast-paced, crazy world. All of these are just high-level items when we are considering features and solutions.
Yeah, true must-haves. Yeah.
Definitely.
Fantastic. That's those are pretty much the slides from my side, Edward.
Great. Yeah. Okay. So now we'll get into the Veeam stuff. Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 is actually the solution, which really relates very heavily to the topic we discussed today. And funnily enough, a lot of the checklists that we just covered around, is it flexible? Is it scalable? Is it, feature rich? And actually, Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, of course, protects your key applications, whether Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business and Teams, but really flexibility is key. I know so many companies that they get locked into a storage they don't want to use just because the backup vendor kind of forces them into it. If they want to switch and change infrastructure, very difficult. They can sometimes get penalized for moving storage or get fees, really get locked in. So Veeam, we're the complete opposite around infrastructure freedom, really allow you to move from Azure to AWS or use a service provider or deploy however you want in a variety of different clouds, and really offer that control to really get your RPO as low as you need and really disperse that RPO across varied departments. You could have one department that's being backed up, multiple times a day, and then one every few minutes. So again, lots of different options, and of course, recovery. We've talked about that in throughout the presentation. Recovery has come up as really the key to making sure that you can get that data back. And clearly, we put a lot of emphasis on this at Veeam. We've got 50+ recovery options. Whether you want to do an in-place, out-of-place restore, and more. And of course, scalability. So we offer powerful search, bulk recoveries, allowing you to restore multiple users all at once, multiple organizations, so that you can get back up and running as quickly as possible. And just a quick kind of view into how all the pieces of the puzzle fit together on this solution. So we back up all those key applications, whether in the cloud or hybrid environment, on-prem Exchange and SharePoint. We allow you to store in a variety of different object storage options, whether Amazon S3, we even have S3 compatible, Azure Blob, IBM Cloud, and of course, on-prem object storage and S3 compatible. And of course, we allow the new copy functionality, which we also enable immutability with that backup copy as well via Azure Blob Archive, S3 and Glacier, and S3 compatible. And recovery capabilities. LA, I'm curious because obviously you are a Veeam customer, you use Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. I think that, as you're using this solution, what are some of the things that you found have been interesting, or what has been some of your experience that you would like to share?
Well, self-service portal, we're kind of looking at the improvement over there, so very curious to test that one. Because that removes, well, I know IT guys, we're all lazy, so that removes, the headache from our engineers and basically allows people to restore their own data over there. And plus, recently, okay, now we're concentrating on the 365, so because I just wanted to go into the data center area. So I would say that, Veeam Explorer and self-service portal, they are the features which are interesting us the most for the 365 environment.
Yeah, you bring up a good point though, because I'm not sure that many of the viewers know that we do have other and encompass more applications aside from just M365, but also virtual, physical, cloud workloads as well. So it's a good call out for sure. I do want to mention before we part ways, we do have version 7. So immutable backup copies. We've talked in large about ransomware today. This really enables your data to become untouchable. You have an immutable backup copy to really ensure that no matter what happens, no matter what vulnerabilities or attacks happen, you're able to get that data back in the state that you need it right away. Advanced monitoring, at-a-glance dashboard, real-time alerts, SLA reporting, making sure that you can meet your RPOs, making sure nothing happens on the back end making sure that you're not running out of storage, giving you alerts to make sure that you are managing your backup environment efficiently. Increased control for BAS. There are many tenants out there that are using service providers today that simply want a little bit more control over their backups, right? Because sometimes when we're working with a service provider and it comes to backup, we're kind of giving all of that responsibility over, but instead with Veeam Service Provider Console and the integrations we've done there, we're really putting the tenants in the driver's seat, allowing them to monitor their own data, restore without service provider assistance. And of course, like Ali mentioned, we have self-service restore portal enhancements, which include support from Microsoft Teams. I know there's been a lot of customers asking for that, so we're excited to get that into the hands of customers. And of course, speaking of customers, Ali is of course one of them. We have 14 million protected users to date. We're Gartner recognized, Forbes recognized, and a Microsoft partner. And we have a few takeaways, so feel free to get out your QR scanners. We have the Gartner report, Should I Backup M365? Feel free to read up or share. We've got the technical guide on how the #1 Microsoft 365 backup solution works. Please download that. We also have a free 30-day trial, so please take that 30-day free trial. We really highly recommend that you take that 30-day free trial, and after that 30 days are up, you get the solution completely free forever, up to 10 users as well. And with that, we'd like to thank you. We really hope you enjoyed this great discussion. I know that I really thoroughly enjoy hanging out with you guys and having a discussion about backup. It's an awesome thing to do that I like to do. So with that, please put in your questions. We will be taking the questions offline, so if you drop your questions in, we'll be definitely getting back to you on those questions. So we hope you enjoyed the presentation today. Again, I know I did. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Archana. Thank you, Ale. Hope you all have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, have a good one.
Okay, yeah, and thanks, Edward, too, for that great discussion. Really appreciate it. It's really informative, lots of insights. Now, before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business, and that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card today is Rick Nelson from Minnesota. So congratulations to Rick Nelson. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Veeam for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending. That concludes today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.